welcome back to PH Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Lily. How we doing?
Good. Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to meet you. Excited to be here.
That's all good. I've actually heard quite a bit about you through the USCA and some different posts that people make. So I'm kind of familiar with what you do. But if you let everyone know who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
Absolutely. Like you said, my name is Lilly Bernardi. I am an assistant strength and conditioning coach at Hofstra University. I am currently going into my third year here. I work with our women's lacrosse, women's soccer, track and field, cross country, men's golf, and I assist with the baseball team. So I have quite a few teams over at Hofstra. I run our internship program and am also an adjunct professor in the exercise science department there. Had a few short stops prior, one at Fordham University for about a year. And then before that, I was a grad assistant at Hofstra. So a little bit of a homecoming once I got my full time role there.
As a strength coach, we deal a lot with Excel's, spreadsheets, and building out the best program that we can for our athletes. Although, when you have these large amount of spreadsheets and Excels and printables and packs that you need to hand out to your athletes, it can get a little bit overwhelming, especially with large amount of files. Mine's personally has crashed, deleted, and that to me is a big burden. That's why since starting my own business, I've went with TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all-in-one programming software that has truly changed and leveled up the way I coach and the way I program for my athletes. With TeamBuildr, you can create customizable workouts, track your athletes' progress in real time, and even generate performance reports with just a few clicks. Athletes can also fill out their own workout data by using either the tablet or their smartphones in the weight room, which, most importantly, eliminates the paperwork that we all hate. This also gives your athletes accountability for their program and their progress as they are immersed within it. If you are interested in using TeamBuildr, head over to teambuildr.com and sign up using code PAChalkup. That's PACHALKUP to start your 30-day free trial. See, that's quite a lot of teams to coach. How is it going through like all of them, and how do you manage all those systems?
Honestly, it is a good amount of teams, but I do not think it's unmanageable, especially at Hofstra. We have a few, different coaches on campus. We have a volunteer assistant coach who helps me a bunch when I can't work with certain teams, and he's kind of started taking over some of the track and field cross country group. Those teams, cross country specifically, they train off campus mostly. So, really, this past year, what I did with them is rather than trying to rush them from their workouts into the weight room and then off to class, what we did is I actually coached their coaches in the
Mm.
training program that I would have them do. So, they have mini bands, they have med balls, and they take them in the van with them when they train off campus. And basically, I went through the workouts with their coaches, and we just found from a timing perspective and to also make sure that we are getting those workouts in throughout the week, it just works a little bit better for them to do it off campus. So I don't necessarily directly work with them and coach
Mhm.
them, but I'm constantly checking in, seeing how those programs are going. When we switch to a new workout, myself or our volunteer coach, Vince, he'll work with the team to show them those new workouts and check in with them. So, as much as they're a team that I'm working with, it's not necessarily the same of getting them in the weight room 2 to 3 times a week as some of the other teams. Um, and we have two weight rooms at Hofstra, which is honestly the beauty of it. So I pretty much stay put in my one weight room all day. Sometimes I do a little bit of back and forth if I have to go to the field and whatnot. But from a scheduling perspective, I think, as much as it is a lot of teams, I much rather be up and on the floor than just sitting around the office.
With and this is something that I've constantly been speaking about, and the importance of that communication between strength coach and head coach, or just coaches in general. How were you able to sort of build those bridges and build that connection so that they can also be part of that program with their athletes?
I think one of the best things for me coming back to Hofstra and having all the teams that I work with was that I already knew all of the head coaches from my prior experience as a graduate assistant and a volunteer assistant. So it was definitely a transition because a lot of those coaches, they saw me in a previous role as a grad assistant, as an intern. And I think, they know who my mentors are, and for better or for worse, maybe they think I'm going to be an exact copy and paste of them. But I also had a different experience at Fordham University where I was able to step outside of Hofstra and discover who I truly was as
Mhm.
a coach. So I think it was great in that they knew me, and I think I got the nod of approval from those coaches when Hofstra was looking to bring me back, which was great. But I think developing my own relationship with them as now their head strength conditioning coach for their sports was, that's something that had to develop a little bit over
Mhm.
time. But all coaches are different. I am someone who very much just likes the expectations laid out for me. I like coaches who allow me and have trusted me to, work in our craft. But I also like to know, okay, this is how many days a week I need you. This is what our expectation is, because I like organization, I like guidelines, but you know, I definitely, like you said, communication is a big aspect of it. So weekly check-ins with all the
Mhm.
coaches and just letting them know what's going on, because, some come to the weight room and they see that part, but other coaches' offices are across campus. So it's important for me to constantly be checking in with them.
100%. You said something really interesting that I kind of want to dive into a little bit. As you were allowed that space to find out what kind of coach you are and develop that side of coaching. How was that process for you, and what sort of trials and tribulations did you go through?
I think something, so that's not to say that as a graduate assistant or as in my volunteer role at Hofstra that I didn't have the freedom previously to do that, but I think it's definitely different when you're thrown into the fire and now you're running the program, right? You're not running someone else's program anymore, you're running your own. So when I got to Fordham, I would say some of the biggest challenges for me, I was either 22 or 23 at the time. So one of the biggest things, right, is that I'm so close in age to some of these
Hmm.
athletes, and especially with the COVID pandemic, the athletes were getting almost older and older, and there were some that probably would have graduated with me. So I think really just distinguishing myself and setting my expectations and my standards and how I walk the floor, how I talk to the athletes, I think that plays a huge part into how I can really address that
Hmm.
issue. Or not that it was really an issue, but it's something that if you don't handle it properly, it can probably, be a little
But
out
yeah,
of control,
yeah.
right? They think that you're a peer as opposed to a superior. So I think walking in and knowing, okay, well, yeah, I look young, but no one actually knows my age. So I'm just going to walk in and act like I own the place. And that's what I did with my teams. And I think maybe one of the other challenges or something that was new to me at Fordham was some of the teams I worked with. I had never seen squash before. I had never worked with a rowing program before. So, really stepping out of my comfort zone, doing research on my own to learn
Mhm.
about those sports, having conversations with their head coaches. I remember they had a new rowing coach at the time who wanted to meet with the entire staff, as much as I wanted to meet with her as well. And she literally took one of the ergs and she showed us like these are all the different parts of the stroke, and these are some
Mm,
misconceptions about the sport. Everyone thinks it's about upper body and pulling, but it's so much lower body drive and things like that. So we had really good conversations that helped me to better understand the sport. What's the difference between their fall season and their spring season, because the distance that they're rowing in those seasons is vastly different. And that's something I would not have known about the sport. So once
mm,
again, it goes back to that communication piece. And I think as a coach, it's important to be inquisitive and proactive.
100%. Your best tool in the toolbox is asking questions.
Yes.
Um, has that experience with the rowing coach sort of shaped how some of the conversations with coaches go from now on?
I think it definitely helps. I think I think it especially helps because you want to learn how to speak the same language as the
Mhm.
coaches, and I think that's also really important with the athletes. So, you know, you not like issues that you can run into, but sometimes I am a female, right? I work with a baseball program. All those guys know that I've never played baseball before because I haven't. But if I can learn the sport and I can talk to them in
Mhm.
language that they understand and indirectly show them that I have a knowledge of what they're doing, even though I didn't play that sport myself, I don't know exactly what it feels like. I'm going to try out all the movements that I do with them in the weight room. Maybe one day, like, I do step out and try to do some of the things they're doing because, they love when you get out there with them in their environment. But I think that just helps with a buy in perspective from the
Mhm.
coaches and the athletes because what they know is their sport. And really, it's our job to figure out how our field enhances their sport.
100%. I think that's a really important thing to hone in is like, and Coach Ron McKeefery has the best saying is like, we're 10% of their performance and we have to mitigate what they do in the 90%. So having an understanding for where things may go wrong can also be beneficial. Like, I never program something that I've not personally done myself. So I
Mhm.
think, and again, it's what you're saying is that buy-in aspect of coaching that really needs to be developed with all your athletes. Is that something that you're constantly thinking about and working on?
Definitely. I think that's what I lead with is, you know, I'm still young in my coaching career. I'm only going into my first year full time. I probably haven't written my best program I'm ever going to write yet. I'm confident in that. I hope that's the case because I want to continue to learn. I want my programming to continue to get better. I want to continue to grow. But something that I am very confident in is that relationship building aspect with my athletes. And I think that's kind of just creating your foundation.
Mm,
Your foundation is going to be the culture that you set with your athletes, being transparent about your standards and your expectations. And, you know, everything else I think kind of comes after that.
yeah. In terms of sort of the management of your teams and how expectations are set out, what are some of the fundamental sort of things that you've got in place that lets them know, okay, this is what's expected of me and how I can reach those goals?
Mhm. So I think my two biggest things as a coach that I look for are respect and effort. And really, the biggest thing for me, and this kind of, I guess, goes a little bit more into my background as well and how I got into strength and conditioning, is I played collegiate lacrosse. I was a senior during COVID. So my career got cut short.
Right.
And, that's something that is very difficult. Like, I still think about it all the time. And my main objective as a coach is I never want my athletes to leave and kind of think about the what ifs. What if I practiced a little bit harder? What if I really, put my all into it? Because you really don't know when it's going to end, whether it could unfortunately be an injury, whether hopefully not, but there's ever a pandemic or something like that
Mhm.
in the future. For me, I had a year of eligibility left. I chose to not take it. It was a hard decision because I would have loved to have played, but I really wanted to dive right into my coaching career. And I recognized the opportunities I was getting and how much time I was truly getting on the field, in the weight room with athletes. And so I'm very transparent with my athletes. I tell them that story. I tell them that about me, because what they know is when you step into the room, when you step out on the field and you're not giving it 100%, you're not giving it your all, I look at that as being a sign of disrespect to me, because I don't want them to take their opportunity they have for granted. And I would do anything if any of my athletes, lacrosse, baseball, like soccer, track and field, if they asked me to take their uniform for a day and go to a practice or compete again, I would do it. And so I think that's a big thing. I usually kind of introduce myself to the teams. I tell them a little bit about myself and my background and how I got here. And that's something that I tell them. And I hope that that's something that they kind of keep in mind when they're in the thick of it. You know, it's hard, and
Hmm.
every day is not fun. I've been there, but every day you almost wish that you can go back to it.
Hmm.
And I hope that when they're going through some of those days, they consider that before they
Yeah.
try to be lazy in front of me, because that's the only time. I'm not a yeller, screamer, but those are the times I really get mad at teams,
Yeah.
when I see that.
100%. I think it also shows like the human side of you when you're being vulnerable and be like, "Hey, this is my experiences. This is what happened."
Mhm.
Have you felt that led to them being a little bit more open and honest with you in terms of how they may be feeling, like during the darkest days of training and practices?
Definitely. I think all my athletes, I mean, I hope all my athletes feel pretty comfortable with me. I think that, like I said, I am big on that culture aspect. I'm big on the relationship building aspect. I feel that I know my athletes. I know what their baseline is. I know what their normal is. If they're walking into the weight room and they're off, or I can tell
Mhm.
they're fighting back tears, because some days that happens, I can usually tell, and sometimes it turns into just like a, "Hey,
Hey,
are you
what's up?
okay?" And then it's waterworks. Like, I've had that happen, many times before, and I usually just, whether they wanna talk or not, I always check in and just make sure they know, "Hey, I'm here to listen, I'm an
Hmm.
outlet," and that doesn't mean, going back to my previous story, that doesn't mean that I don't wanna sit down with you and you be able to confide in me, right? Like, it's not all pretty all the time, but
Yeah,
when you have the choice to be all in, I think it's all in or all out. I don't like
100%.
the in
In
between.
between. Yeah. Coach Sachin had a brilliant thing that he does. And like since then I've noticed how powerful it actually is. So we all fist bump our athletes, dap them up, whatever. And like you can tell a lot about how they're feeling that day due to the energy that they're putting into that action. Like if they're giving like a half-assed like fist bump, you're like, "What's wrong with you today?
Right.
Let me know, and we can talk about it. We can adapt the session, whatever." And like the thing that I love as well is like when I was interning for the Scottish Development Squad, the coach had a rule that was called the open door policy. So as long as his door was open, like and he wasn't in meetings or whatever, any athlete at any time can go in and speak to him about anything, whether
Mhm.
that's how they're getting on a school, how they're getting on their personal life, even just like talk about football, whatever. Our football, not your football. Um, but it was just that openness to, and it kind of sounds like something that you've built across there is that openness to have your athletes come to you and be like, "Hey, actually, today's not the day. Let's let's talk about it."
Right. Yeah, and I think part of it too is knowing sometimes when this, okay, this is something that needs to be addressed right now, or this is a person that I can address right now, or maybe they'll never talk to me,
Mm,
or is this someone that, you know, I'm going to let them do their thing. I'm going to keep it in mind. I'm going to shoot them a text after they leave lift today. "Hey, just want to check in, see if you're okay. If you want to talk, let me know." Like something like that,
100%.
just so they know, "Hey, I saw that you were a little off. Up to you if you want to discuss or not."
Yeah, it's always good to put it back into their side of the court for whenever they want to approach you. I think that's a key skill as well. Um, how does that affect the program, knowing that they can sort of come up to you at any point, and how's that sort of benefited their performance?
I think really well. I think that my athletes have a lot of trust in me, and they know that I'm still going to push you. I'm going to
Mm.
challenge you. Our workouts might suck, and it's all in your best interest. It's not supposed to be easy. Those are the things I want to tell them. If this is easy, then we got to level up because we're not getting better if it's easy. So, every time it gets a little bit easier, great, but just know it's going to get hard again because we
Mhm.
have to push where we can. But I think building that trust with them, it's not, oh, Lily's out to get me. It's, you know, I am being pushed. She has our best interest in mind. This is going to pay off.
Mhm.
Doesn't feel great now, but it's going to pay off later. And honestly, it's going to pay off later when it counts for something.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a good way of looking at it as well. It's like it's not the marginal changes right there and then. It's like what is to come, and I think that's what our job sort of supports mainly is like not the quick, easy fixes. It's that sucky darkness that you feel the whole way through. But then when you get to your performance and you're in season, and
Mhm.
those darknesses creep in, and you're like, oh fuck it, I've done this. Let's go.
Absolutely. I think sometimes that's the hardest concept for some of the athletes to understand. And even sometimes the coaches maybe don't realize it is just your main time with me to make progress is your off season. And I
Mhm.
think this is something that maybe is a little more clear, at least the way I think about it, and in terms of some of the teams and the way they think about it is, for spring sports in the fall, I work with them and their season is that next semester. It's the same school year. When I'm working with my women's soccer team, they're in season in the first semester that they come in, and then they have winter break, it's the holidays, then we come back for the spring semester. But then we have summer break somewhere in between. And to the athletes, sometimes it's just, oh, yeah, we're practicing, we're playing some games. It doesn't really count for anything. We're training, we're in the grind. But that is when I need them to push. If we get to season and their coaches are, oh, they're too slow, they're out of shape, or the girls are coming to me, hey, I need extra conditioning, I'm not feeling great, it's too late at that
Yep.
point. Yeah, we can do things, but the demand on them in their practices, in their game schedule is so much more at that point that there's only so much I can do
Mhm.
without overworking them at that point. And I think that for them, it's a little hard to conceptualize because they're almost doing the work the year ahead.
I think that's a good point. Is like the season is won in preseason, so like you're constantly chasing that win, and like the season's just about maintaining and just keeping everything at a steady pace that they've been working throughout. Like one of the seasons that my team did really well. We practiced 2 days a week. We gymmed 3 days a week, and it was hard. Like every session was hard. People spewing, things were happening, but when we go into season, it made it so much easier, so much better to actually go through with everything. And I think that's what a lot of programs miss out on is that yes, let's do the sucky work now so that in season we just have to maintain and just keep pushing that zones while we can.
Mhm. I think with that too is if you really truly put that work in the off season, you are going to reap the benefits of it
Mhm.
in season. And when that happens, you realize how important that training you did in the off season was. If you're kind of going through the motions and you're putting half effort into that season, into the off season, and then you go into season and it's about mediocre, no different than last year, they're not really going to value the training that they do because it didn't make a difference. Oh, we did all that and it didn't make a difference. Well, okay, you did it, but you checked a box. You didn't do it to the best of your ability. And I think that is where people start to realize the value in strength conditioning is when they truly, truly exert themselves and
Mhm.
put what they can into it.
I've beat this horse to a pulp at this point, but it's like the intent behind the training is what is the value in what we do. If like you come in and you mean to do every single rep, you mean to do every single set, like you might lose, but you know you've gave it everything, and
Mhm.
that's all there. With the sort of different schedules, how is it managing between all your teams, and how does like a day to day look like for you and your athletes when there's different teams coming in and different seasons happening all at once?
It honestly, I'd say it depends on time of year, my day to day, and honestly, it depends on the day, what my day to day looks like. It totally changes throughout the week because I have, let's say, roughly 6 teams, and in the off season, or why don't I start in the fall? I have women's lacrosse 4 days a week in the
Wow.
fall. Women's soccer, I'm with them pretty much more in preseason when not everyone else is on campus. I'll do warm ups, I'll go to practices, and we don't do anything too intense in season. Kind of optional lift things like that.
Is
And
it optional lifts or actual optional lifts?
you know what? It so we've gone back and forth a few times. We have tried making it mandatory, but if it was mandatory, it was kind of post practice because that's when everyone was available. And they're all showing up exhausted, tired. So I wondered how
Effective
how
it's
valuable is this? And then we didn't we didn't offer a specific time for their team specifically
Mhm.
to come in, and I just sent them the weekly hours. Hey, this is when the weight room's open. And you get a good amount of athletes coming in, the ones who really like the weight room. I think that this past spring was a breakthrough year for us in the weight room. So I'm excited to see what this in season looks like. And my approach this year is I don't want to have athletes just randomly popping in because if you do a workout on Wednesday and it's been 2 weeks and then all of a sudden it's Thursday and you have a game, you're going to be sore as hell. So I want to have a little bit more control of it this year. And I think my approach is going to be on Tuesdays. I will have an hour designated for that team specifically to come into the weight room. And I'm just going to keep note of not to say you're not coming in,
Mhm.
but if you weren't here last week, your workout's going to be different than someone who did come in last week because I'm not messing with soreness and all that if you just jump in with someone who's been coming in consistently for a month. So I think that's going to be my approach is you do not have to if you're someone who doesn't feel great after lifting throughout the week. Okay, up to you. But if you do want to come in, I have a little control of when that's going to be and what I think is a good idea for you to be doing.
100%. I really like the optional lifts because it kind of gives them that controllability of their performance. It gives them back that let's
Mhm.
let's make sure I have everything to go into that season. And you can really tell who's really in that session or not. Um, like at UW, we had optional lifts. It was a Saturday. Like the whole team came, and it was something that Coach Mack had built throughout the year. And like he spoke to me, and he was like, "We started with 10 people. Now we're like on 70 each practice. There's 2 practices every day for it. So it's something that really works to build in that team team cohesion and just like really build that effort. Has that been something that has happened, or is it still to be seen with the new changes that you're implementing?
To be seen this upcoming fall. They've done it in the past with a different coach, but I don't think any of those girls are still here.
Mm.
So I think, fingers crossed. The hope is that last year, I know which individuals on my team were in the weight room on a weekly basis. I think we had a breakthrough spring, and I'm hoping to see some more faces this year. I know a few of them have asked me wanting to have
Mm.
team lifts. But I think the coaches and I just spoke and decided, hey, I think giving them the option at least and having a little bit of control over it. We don't have to make it mandatory, but at least we'll see who wants to. And I'm hopeful. I think they'll take me up on it.
No, 100%. Like you do reap the benefits. How experimental are you with your program, and like what sort of things do you tend to experiment with when designing the programs?
I think that like my meat and potatoes definitely stay the same. My major movements for certain teams. I think some of my accessory work I've changed around, played with a little bit, maybe specific rep ranges, tempos, things like that. Speed and agility is something I definitely honed in a little bit more on this year. We just got lasers for our
Mm.
teams. We're a little behind, but we just got lasers, and I've been playing around with them myself all
Like
summer.
the speed gates.
The speed gates,
Yeah,
yep, yep. So that's
that's
something
cool.
that was new this past spring. I tried it out with one of my teams. This summer, I've been running out there myself, getting my cleats on every Wednesday, and something that now I'm hoping to use with some of my spring teams as well. So I'd say that I definitely change things, move them around, but my programming isn't anything crazy special. I think I
It's
focus
kind of
on
basic.
movement patterns. I have my checklist of based on sport. Hey, these are the movements that I think are really important. I want to make sure I got, double leg, single leg, multiple plane movements, different angles for our upper body push pulls, core. And I think maybe where I play around a little bit more is our accessory stuff. What's important for certain sports? Is it concussion prevention? Is it ACL injury prevention? Is it grip strength and or rotator cuff, things like that? I think I play around a lot with my accessory work and maybe the exercises that I do to fit my main categories for my program, if that makes sense. So always trying different exercises, but I think the overall concepts and what is on my checklist has stayed solid.
Consistent. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to hammer in, and I've spoke to multiple coaches on it, and it's like you can only move a certain ways. Like your body doesn't really know if it's a like a multi-tiered exercise or just a plain exercise. Like you can only pull one certain way, and like these TikTok and Instagram like posts of coaches being like mad with exercise. It looks fun, fancy and nice, but meat and potatoes like the basics, the your squat patterns, your hinges, your
Hmm.
knee dominant, push pull, like that's always going to remain the same, and it should be that.
Definitely. One of my favorite books is Movement Over Maxes by Zach Dakin. And I think he really just breaks down the really, really important movement patterns. Granted, he's a baseball guy, and sometimes in there he throws in some baseball things. But I do think that a lot of the patterns that he talks about are the first things that I'm always addressing with my athletes. And I think that's helpful. And, back to what you were saying as well is the sports are the sports. And
Mhm.
yes, you have rule changes sometimes that do change the sport, but we know the qualities that we're looking for with our athletes. So that won't change much. But we also know that there's hundreds of different ways to achieve that. And it's
Mhm.
going to be about what works best for you or what is working for you. And honestly, that might change year to year with the same team. I might have a brand new class of, let's say, 13 or 15 athletes that are coming in this year. And what worked for me this past year might not work the next year, depending on the type of athletes I'm bringing in. So I might just have to brainstorm and chase that same quality I'm looking for, but I might just have to find a different way to do it.
100%. Like, and I've this is I think the third episode in a trot that I've filmed and said this, but like sport specific isn't a thing that we need to do. If we want them to do sport specific, let the head coaches deal with that because we're never going to get sport specific in the weight room. Loads are different, the gravity is different, the movements are different. we can implement movements that help and support what they're doing on the field, make them stronger, balancing them out. But we can never get that movement requirement the exact same.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And honestly, sometimes if they're already doing so much of that in their sport, we don't want to overdo it now, loaded in the weight room. I think you really have to consider how much time they're spending already doing that. That's a bucket that's already being filled
Hmm.
somewhere else. And sometimes our job is to just fill the buckets that aren't being filled elsewhere, because it's going to just enhance those movements that we're looking for.
100%. I think bucket filling is one of the biggest things that I took from my experience in America. And by the way, I will always say this to all American coaches: the way that you run your programs, like collegiate programs, is so much better than anywhere else. Like, just the fact that you've got like Olympic teams, like what you would call Olympic teams, is multi-sport, and like you're constantly having to go between them all to like coach and figure out how they move. I think that's super beneficial as a strength coach, because you're constantly having to like be on the spot and just be like, okay, what do I need to do? What's important for them? What's not important for them?
Mhm.
And I think having that ability to just like fill buckets and see what buckets need filled for different athletes. And I've just spoke up to um, Cameron Diaz about this, and it was like your springy guys, they probably need some strength. The fast guys probably need some strength and power. Like,
Mhm.
there's so many like different ways you can fill their buckets to make them a balanced athlete. And think that's what we're always chasing. Is not overpowering them with one specific element of strength and conditioning, but filling all the other buckets so that they can be balanced. So when they do go perform, they mitigate that injury risk and they outperform each season.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a great point. And one of my coworkers, DJ, he works with our men's lacrosse team, and that's something that they played around with a little bit this year. Was these are the guys who are powerful that could probably use a bit more strength, or these are the guys who are new, and before we do a lot of powerful stuff with them, we're going to create that strength baseline for them, and then we're going to build off of it. And so they'll start in the strength group and eventually they'll go into the power group, because we need to prepare them for that first. Or we have the guys who have a good level of strength, and now we're going to switch our focus to power and speed. And I think that that's something, that goes to what you're saying, and I think something that they valued as well, right? So maybe it's not sport specific, but the athletes do feel with that, oh, the coaches are really thinking about what I need. It's not a one size fits all program. And on that topic, I think when me as a coach, when I write a program, I'm writing it for the whole team. I'm not sitting down, I have 6 teams. I'm not sitting down and writing 30 different programs for the women's lacrosse team, right? But as my athletes are in the weight room and we're going through this program, there's athletes who have injuries that I have to write them different programs. Or there's athletes who, like we said before, with finding what is the right movement. There might be someone who really struggles with a certain movement and it's not working for them. I have different variations of my squat going on. Maybe someone is front squatting. I love to use a front squat because I do cleans with my athletes, so that front rack position is important to me. But if I have an athlete with a wrist injury or something's going on, I might use a safety bar or something with them. And that's where you can get more individualized with your athletes, is actually evaluating the session, walking through the room and seeing what's going on and seeing if there are changes that need to be made for specific individuals.
100%. I think, and again, I'm a contractor for TeamBuildr, so I rep TeamBuildr, but like bias aside, I think that's where programs like that come in really handy, because you can have the whole program under all the athletes, but then you can go in on the back end and be like, okay, instead of squatting, you've had an ACL injury, let me get some skiers into you instead. Let me
Mhm.
work on that lateral movement in a slow tempoed way so that you can build up that resistance and resilience on that specific movement.
Right. Yeah. So at Hofstra, I'm a pen and paper person. Like I just put everything into Excel, print out my sheets for my athletes. That's how we currently do it at Hofstra with two weight rooms. When we have to make an investment in a piece of technology like that, we have to consider we have 25 racks in total. So it's a big investment when we do that. But I did use TeamBuildr when I was at Fordham, and that was something, oh my gosh, I utilized so much with my teams, but more specifically, my baseball team. That is one team where it didn't get super player specific, but sometimes with pitchers, you know how they can be with certain movement patterns. I'll give them some different options in there, maybe a different angle for our upper body press if they want to. But I had probably 7 different programs going at a time. And I have to say, if I was doing all of that on paper, that would have been difficult. And TeamBuildr certainly came in handy when I had to make those last minute switches and someone just got hurt at practice and I got to move them into the lower body only group or whatever it is.
100%. Like I've been an Excel guy my whole career. Like when I discovered about TeamBuildr and started using it, I was like, damn, I'm I'm not going back. Like budgets are a real thing as well. That people
Sure.
don't always consider strength and conditioning coaches to have much power in.
Hmm.
But like we're a whole department and we need to focus on like what's the main things that I need to really run this program the way I want it. So like when you're thinking about like equipment and what really needs to be in the weight room for you guys, what's the things that you look for and what kind of equipment are you using?
For us, we're actually in a unique position right now because last year, one of our weight rooms was brand new. It got renovated last year. It's entirely different than our other weight room. So, in our new weight room, our racks have power blocks. So, that's totally different with just programming. I think in in a lot of ways, it it helps, but it could also be there's less dumbbells in the room, but the benefit is at each rack we have 15 pounds available, because if I am having some of my athletes do overhead press, everyone's running for the 15s and I only have about 3 sets of them, right? So having the power blocks allows for all 10 racks to have a set of 15 dumbbells. But also I have to consider the fact that with that, I only have 2 handles at each rack. So I can't superset 2 dumbbell exercises because that's not going to work for all the athletes that are lifting at that rack. So for us, we are starting now to go through the process. I work in the weight room that is hopefully getting updated in the near future, but we're working through, okay, we have more racks on this side of campus. We want everything that that side of campus has, but what else could we use over here? In my weight room, we have pretty much direct access to the lacrosse field. So we do a lot of our speed and agility back to back with our lifting, or we have the ability to do so. So we might consider some more sleds or things that we could use that we maybe have but don't quite have enough of. So I think my biggest consideration when I'm programming as far as equipment is just space and how many of each and team size, because there are some things that I can do with a really small team. We have 2 GHR machines, reverse hypers, in our weight room. So I can use those with our men's golf team, but I'm probably not using them with our soccer or women's lacrosse team. So I have to be experimental in, okay, what's a different movement that's going to work better for this team?
Fun fact, that's my favorite piece of equipment.
I love
I
it.
love bodyweight.
We had the really nice ones at Fordham where you can load it with the plates.
Mm.
I love that one. So
Have you
I'm
seen the ones
excited.
from West Side Barbell, like the back extension one as well?
I know what you're talking about, and I think Sorinex I've seen at the most recent conferences, they have that like loaded back extension machine. So that's what I'm picturing. Is it in conjunction with a Frankenhyper?
So it's yeah. I'm a big posterior chain guy. Like I think all movement should come from those bases, like
Mm.
hit your posterior chain and then hit everything else. Big into the Olympic weightlifts as well. So like for me, that's how programs. That's how I got introduced to strength and conditioning. So that's my bread and butter as well. But like the GHRs are just like you can do so much on them. They're
Hmm.
so versatile, and you can like really build up some really fast athletes with it.
Yep, I love them, and selfishly, I use them a lot in my own training, and unfortunately, can't use them with all of my teams. But it definitely forces me to get creative.
100%. And like, what's your take on like methodology of programming for that season? Like, what do you consider to be key to work on first, and then everything follows after that?
Mm, good question. So sometimes I think it's dependent on time of year and if they're in season, off season, and this might vary depending on my teams. So, like you said, I think Olympic lifting and we learn that those power movements they should be first exercise order, right? Um, I personally, I'm a big tier system person.
Mm.
I love the tier system. I think it works really well for me and just the
Can you explain what a tier system is and
yeah,
break it?
so essentially tier system, it is designed for, or the way I use it is 3 days a week of training, and you're following total, lower, upper, and those are your three blocks, and it can continue on total, lower for all of your accessory stuff. But then the next day is going to be lower, upper, total, and follow the pattern, and then the last one upper, total, lower, and then follow the pattern through. So what I really love about it is that our main movement, we get 1 day a week where our focus is like, hey, if for our total body, I can use an Olympic variation, I could use a deadlift variation, something like that. For lower body, probably a squat or deadlift pattern, and our upper body, some type of pressing movement. So what I love about the tier system is just that every day I am getting components of something, right? A lot of my teams train 2 or 3 days a week. And what I do with my teams is going to vary based on whether they do 2 or 3 days a week. I don't personally have any teams that lift 4 days a week. I know some people will follow that upper lower split, maybe kind of like West Side Method style, where you have your max effort and your dynamic effort. I personally don't have any teams that are training 4 days a week, so I've never programmed them that way. But what I love about the tier system is, let's say I have my emphasis on my total body day today, but I still get my accessories for my lower body and my upper body. I still get that in. On my second day, I have my lower body, I have my upper body, and then I have my total body. So I get components of everything. And then let's say the plan is for day 3, I have an emphasis on my upper body, and then my accessories are total body and lower body. What happens a lot in college sports? Schedule change. Oh, we're going to cancel lift last minute, and we're going to go 2 days a week this week. Is that ideal? No, but nothing's ever ideal. I'll say that.
Mhm.
And second, with that, it's fine. I'm already confident. I didn't do my heavy upper body bench day maybe during that week, but I definitely got pressing variations in somewhere else. So it's not the end of the world. And also, if that happens in the future, or it's kind of fluid as well. I can pick
Mhm.
up where I left off, and when we come in that next week, I don't have to jump back to that
The
Monday
supplements.
lift, right? Like I could just pick up on that Friday and change the order. You definitely have to consider sometimes what time of the year it
Mhm.
is, because I'm probably not squatting them heavy if they have a
The day
game
before
or
practice.
hard
Yeah.
practice or things like that. So definitely a lot to consider. But I think it's great for sometimes those last minute changes and things that do occur in the schedule. So there's many ways. Well, I'd say there's probably one really correct way to use it the way Joe Ken explains it. He has this max effort, dynamic effort, repetition effort. So you're also getting varying volume and emphasis throughout the tier system. But for me, the biggest piece of it, it keeps my brain so organized. When I write a program, everything has a place. And when I write the next iteration of the program, guess what? I know that I'm just doing the next progression of that exercise and I know exactly where it's going. So that's my favorite part about the tier system is maybe I don't follow it exactly to a T, exactly how it was intended all the time, depending on what team I'm using it with. But it really helps keep my brain
Mhm.
organized and makes programming that much easier for me. So
I think
definitely that are 3 days. I use that.
100%, 100%. Like I think the most effective strength coaches is the ability to sort of look at different types of programming and pick and choose from each what works best for you and your program. And
Mhm.
like I said that I like my Olympic lifts and I like my posterior chain, I like my strength, I like my power, but I follow the same similar like lower upper full. Like that's just it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And like for me as well on the and I'm sick of talking about periodization because like you've just mentioned things go all out the window so quick because like you can't follow a true periodization plan if like a coach the night before is like, hey, plans change, they're actually traveling now, so your session goes and your periodization goes, and then what do you have? Uh, you- you've just got a
Yeah.
failed expectation that that was the thing to do, and I need to chase that thing again. One of the
Right.
best lessons I learned, and like it was one of those that it's so simple that you kind of look at it and was like, why didn't I think about that beforehand? And it
Mhm.
goes back to what we were saying about like balancing the athlete out. In these programs, you're always chasing that balance. For me, anyways, and it's that push to pull. I like coach Fink introduced me to this, and he actually sent me the textbook, which I was like, "Wow, this is genius." But it was like you need to have as much pushes as you do pulls in your program, and that for me, I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." But like I'd never thought about it because I didn't know about it.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of I almost think of it the opposite. I need as many pulls as I have pushes, right? You're a big posterior chain person. Like I'd rather have like more pulling than I need than not enough. So sometimes I try to go if I can almost like a 2-to-1 pull to push ratio to make sure I'm getting enough posterior chain, especially in a lot of the overhead sports and things like that, or if we're thinking about a lot of the field sports and keeping the lower body, knees, and things like that healthy. Definitely at least a 1-to-1 pull
Mm,
push posterior chain to quad dominant movement ratio is definitely something
agree.
I am
Agree.
looking for.
No, like again, like the push and pull can be pull push. Doesn't matter. Like you need to have some sort of balance for
Mhm.
that set of athletes. That set of like that athlete really. Like you, there's so much that could go wrong, and it goes back to that 90 to 10%.
Mhm.
We've got 10% of their time, but they can fuck it out all up on the 90% that they have themselves.
Right. I think that speaks to our roles not only in the weight room or on the field as strength coaches, but we just wear so many different hats too. One of the things I want to create a good athlete, but I also want to create lifelong health for my athletes. I hope that maybe they don't have to run their conditioning test ever again once they graduate. I'm fine with that. But I hope I gave you the tools so that if you do want to keep yourself in shape, if you do want to train, that you have had a bunch of options and you know how to do it. Nutrition is a huge thing, dependent on if you have a sport dietitian, and that is entirely their sector. For us, we have like a part-time sport dietitian. She's not only for the athletes on campus. So some of those more general day to day questions do come to us, and we have to help them out with it as well. And
Hmm.
that's the 90%. Sleep, hydration. I think that's something that falls in our scope. There's other people who can
Hmm.
talk to them about that as well. But like you said, it's that 90% that is really going to make the difference.
100%. And I think like I always hate saying this because people don't think that this is true, but athletes technically spend the most time with us. Like whether people like to admit it or not, 90% of their time is probably with us. Like that's blown out exaggeration of percentages, but we spend a lot of time with them, so they'll think that we wear all these hats. Like I've had athletes being like, "Oh, I've just came back from injury. What exercise should I be doing?" I was like, "Look, I'm a strength coach, and technically I could help, but there's physios across there or PTs. Go see them. Like they're the people to deal with that. Because if I do something and I fuck up, that's me."
Right, right.
And like nutritionists, sorry.
I was going to say, once you give me your modifications, I can tell you what you can and can't do, but I can't tell you what you can and can't do.
100%, 100%. And like for me, nutrition is so important. And like I've spoke to nutritionists on the podcast, and it's the foundation for everything that they do. Like if they don't have that fuel, I'm not going to be able to push you as much as I can. Nor I will refuse to be like, yeah, no, you're taking it easy today. You've not ate, you've not drank. I'm not going to push you that hard because you won't be able to recover from it.
Definitely. Definitely. It's huge. I think about myself too, and when I was a college athlete, I was practicing 3 hours a day, probably lifting, running, all this stuff. I probably trained day to day more than I do now. I train every day now. My training looks different, but I probably hours wise, I probably trained way more in college than I do now. I've never been in better shape in my life. And that piece, it's the nutrition, it's the sleep, it's those things that I changed. Being home, being able to cook for myself, not being in college, um, maybe lack of education a little bit too, or lack of availability. I know that it's challenging for athletes, right? They're running all around campus. They just have to eat something and they'll eat what's convenient for them. But I think if we can educate them enough, they can plan better for it. And once again, just give them the tools in order
Mhm.
to make better decisions.
100%. Like when I was in like the starting phase of my programs, I was 13 when I started strength and conditioning. That same year, we had like a nutritional like night where the coaches went through nutritional education. Terrible advice. Like what they had us eat was god awful, but it was still that okay. Let's look at how important that is in going forward. Like that session always stuck with me, not for the food element of it, but like the importance of fueling for your sport. um the way that you run, because you don't have a full-time nutritionist, like how is that managed throughout all the athletes and essentially the program?
So, our nutritionist on campus, she is the main dietitian for all of Hofstra's campus, and she will work with our athletes, but she also only has so much time in the day. And I believe she also works on another campus, if I'm correct.
Wow.
So, she's great. And as frequently as we need her, she will be available for us. So, she has done plenty of nutrition presentation and even reoccurring nutrition presentations with our teams as needed. I would say, in terms of working with athletes, it's more of those specific case by case scenarios. I would say that if athletes have a very specific goal in mind, or you know, athletes, some of them have eating disorders or potential eating disorders or things like that, disordered eating, should I say, those types of cases, she will make the time, and not
Mhm.
to say she wouldn't make the time for others, but those are the people that we will put in contact with her. People who have very specific goals, people who play sports where, you know, maybe cutting weight is essential and we need to figure out the best means to do that. People who come to us with very specific questions that I personally feel she is better to answer, right?
Mhm.
If athletes are coming to me more with just general questions about food options, or hey, what do you think, this versus that, or supplements, is this good to take, should I take that, I think those are questions that our
Mhm.
staff is equipped to answer, and maybe ones that don't have to make their way all the way up the chain. Also, I want to make sure that she has a good working relationship with us as well, so I don't want to send people to her if I think it's just one appointment and it's just never going to happen again. I
Hmm.
think it's more the individuals who are looking for, you know,
Specific
let's
advice.
let's
Yeah.
check in, let's have more meetings, let's create some goals and means to achieve those goals. If it's more of a generic question, everyone on our staff, I believe, it has some nutrition certification.
Nice. You brought it up, so I feel obliged to speak about it. The supplement talks with athletes is always one of my favorites, because if it was up to them, they'll take everything under the sun, and that will get them pinged.
Mhm.
Is that talks that you've experienced and dealt with?
Definitely. My conversations with the athletes are, supplementation is an option, but I don't prefer it to be the only option. It's not making up for what
Solid
you're not
nutrition.
doing almost. For some it could make up for what you can't do, whether you have, let's say, an intolerance of a certain product or food or whatever it may be. Supplementation is great for that, but it's not, we're just going to drink 10 protein shakes during the day because I didn't have enough time or didn't make the time to cook myself, I don't know, chicken or whatever it is,
Mhm.
right? It's not, they're not there to make up for your poor habits. They are almost an extra layer after. It's the next step to me, I think. I'm not a big supplements person myself. Maybe some protein powder, but more like I use more plant-based, just not as much dairy agreeing with me. But other than that, pre-workout, I'm good for a cup of coffee a day. Pre-workout's not my thing. Energy drinks, I've had one sip before in my entire life because my staff at Fordham asked me to take a sip of a Monster. I have never had one in my life. I know it would be way
Wow.
too much for me, but um, yeah. So honestly, sometimes when it comes to supplementation, I can look at ingredients, I can look at the databases, but a lot of times I'll also refer my athletes to my colleagues because I think they might have more experience with supplementation and just more knowledge about it. If I'm being fully transparent, I'm not gonna, BS my way through a question if I think that I have the tools or someone else who is better suited to answer them.
I think that's an important thing to know, admit as well. Like this industry is full of egos, and you've probably encountered some of them. But like admitting that you're maybe not as knowledgeable as like your colleague is so important. And like I love referring people to people that I know that know more on the subject. Like if I've got like a specific like PT type question, I know who to refer to. Like I'm really interested in like this like yoga for athletes based things. I've got someone that I can ask those questions and like how to best implement like movement patterns that will flow better with their sport. And I think that's a really good thing to be able to do as well.
I think that also just goes with putting together, and that could be people outside your staff, but when I think about it, I think about my staff and the people that I work with. And I think it's important that we have a strong staff, but that doesn't mean that all of our strengths have to be the same, because if we all have the same strengths and we all have the same philosophies and ideas and we program exactly the same and then we also have all the same weaknesses, we have a big weakness gap. We need to balance each other out. I'm sure that I have some strengths that my colleagues look to me to, in the same way that I'll refer others to them because I think that they're more suited to answer those. And then it also just goes back to the trust piece, right? Let's say an athlete asks me a question on supplementation and I give them bad advice, or let's say I accidentally tell them that they can take a supplement that they can't, demolishes our trust. They're not going to trust me, right? It just goes
100%.
back to that. I'm just going to be honest with them and say, hey, I think this is a good question to ask DJ or Dom or Kelly or something else.
100%. What's the hill that you would die on in this industry?
I think, ooh, okay, so bear with me because I'm not saying that the science of what we do isn't important, because I think that
I know
we
where you're
obviously,
going. I
yeah,
love it.
we
Go,
have
go, go,
to
go.
we have to have our certifications, right? We That's step one. No matter what, that's step one. But after that, I don't care about the program you write. I want to make sure it's safe, but I don't care about the program you write. I want you to be able to coach it and interact and really build a good culture and a good system. And my big word when you ask about my philosophies is impact. I just want to have a good positive impact on the lives of the athletes and coaches
Mhm.
and people that I work with on a daily basis. And to me, the art of coaching is what makes a great coach. You can be a good coach with good programming, but it's having the tools and ability to create those relationships and the art of coaching that makes a great coach.
100%. I've started coining that the practical science of coaching. So science is great and you need it, but being able to know what's actually relevant to what you're doing. Because like a lot of science is good, but how many variables are controlled within that study?
Hmm.
All of them. So and dealing with people, you're not going to control every variable. Someone's going to break up with someone, families fight, those kids are coming into your weight room, and it's that building the trust to communicate like what we've spoke about, and really getting to know them and being able for them to trust you to be like, yeah, I'm having a bad day.
Hmm. Definitely. And like you said before, right? Things change all the time. Sessions get canceled. Periodization goes to crap. It goes out the window. Then what?
100%, I agree. um what is your PR song?
Oh my gosh, I've never gotten this question. It's actually,
I'll blow
I
your
feel like
mind with the
people
next
won't
one.
accept it. Okay, wait, I'm just gonna look up
Yeah, yeah, you're
what
good.
version of it, because I know the one that I like isn't the original. So my PR song, it's probably in most of my videos, but it's Zombie.
Okay.
But I think it's originally by the Cranberries, right?
Hmm.
But the version I like is the Bad Wolves version of it.
Okay.
And that's my PR songs. I One of the coaches previously on the Hofstra staff, when I used to train with them all the time, she played it and I just fell in love with it. And ever since then, it's my PR song.
Who did you say it was by?
I think it's Bad Wolves.
Okay, I'll need to listen to that one.
It takes a
um
little, it takes a little to build, so I go at a
oh,
very
it's one of those that you
specific
have to
part of the
concentrate,
part of the
gives you that
song.
concentration space.
Yep, right. Put the belt on, walk over to the chalk. I got about a minute, and then I know when it's go time.
Nice. It's not really a PR song, but it's one song that I like. It's one of my favorite songs ever. It's called "Man," and it's by the 1975. Takes a century to get into the lyrics, and it's like 10 seconds worth of lyrics, but those 10 seconds are so fucking good. It's
Okay.
"Menswear," "Menswear" by the 1975.
Men's Wear, the 1975. Okay, cool. I'm adding it to my place. I feel like that song is maybe unexpected from me, and maybe the type of music that I like to PR to. It's all that just like screaming nonsense. I don't even know what they're saying half the time. Yeah, cool. I see it. I'm adding it to my playlist.
um, the second question to that two-parter: what's your conditioning playlist?
Ooh. Hmm. Lately, I my least favorite thing is being on aux, because I think
Mm,
there's so much pressure with it. People are very, very specific with what they like to listen to while they train and while they lift. And everyone will vouch for me that any opportunity to not be on the aux, I won't. But DJ is great. So lately, when I've been throwing on my cleats and doing speed and agility and stuff, I've been putting on just his EDM playlist. I
mm.
don't even know what song I would
Raising that
say.
heart rate.
Yeah, that, or I am big on mixes. So if I'm just going
Mm,
for just a run, I love either the big booty mixes or down under. They have normal music, or I'm a big country person. They have down under country mixes. And
nice.
it's either EDM or those if I'm out for a good run.
One thing that I hate about my time in America is I got to really like country music. So
Welcome. It's my favorite.
like since coming back, I'm like, oh, I hated it, but it's so good.
It's so good. It's so good. Also, this could also be random, but I've done like 10K turkey trot in my life. It was like a 6 mile run or whatever. I like listening to podcasts when I run.
Yeah.
If I'm out for just a distance run, I'm a podcast person because I feel like music is so repetitive and I just feel like I'm on a loop. But a
Mhm.
podcast is like a story that you're just following the whole time. So I like
Um,
those.
I I like to experience the dark zone quite a lot, as I'm just not well in the head sometimes. So I've I sometimes do 2 hour to 4 hour bike sessions. Yeah, it's not healthy, and I will make sure to say that I fuel myself properly throughout. Like I have like snacks and water, plenty of water, electrolytes beside me the whole time. It's healthy. I do it healthily, but I like to feel that I can do it.
Mhm.
So like for that, films are great. I've put on seasons as well. Like I'll just watch a whole show. But yeah, music for that is doesn't always work.
Right. It's hard sometimes. I like what at home, my treadmill is right in front of the TV. So if I'm home and I'm on the treadmill, I'm just watching TV.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's yeah. It's something that sort of makes you somewhat forget what's going on.
Definitely.
What's one piece of advice that you would give new strength and conditioning coaches or coaches wanting to come into this industry?
I'll give my favorite piece of advice and the one that I got from my mentor is that you're never ready for your next step. You're never going to feel 100% ready to sit down and take the CSCS exam, but guess what? There's a GA opportunity waiting for you that's going to require that. So go take it. You're never going to feel ready to transition from a GA to a full-time coach, and honestly sometimes a lot of it's learning on the go, but getting thrown into the fire and stepping into an opportunity that you're prepared for but maybe mentally and confidence wise you don't think you're ready for, you are. And I think you just have to be confident in yourself and go for that opportunity. There's never a right time to do anything, right? It's what time is right for you, not necessarily what time is right for somebody else. But I think just you're never ready for your next step, but go for it.
To piggyback off that, I've got this saying, and I heard it when I was in trials, and like it stuck with me through everything that I do. And now any opportunity that comes across, I think about it, and it's like shy boys don't get sweets, right? So it's that if you don't chase it, you're not going to get it. That's
Hmm.
simples.
Yeah. I feel like in my short career so far, there's so many things that I have maybe been asked to do or someone was maybe encouraging me to do. And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, what? Am I ready for this? Even just speaking at conferences and things, I've been asked to do presentations and I say yes. And then I figure it. Yeah, exactly. I say yes. And then I figure it out later. What am I going to talk about? I don't know, but I want to do it because I think that's something that will challenge me and help me grow as a coach. That's something that I never expected to love to do, but I also think it helps me better today sitting here and talking to you. I'm just more comfortable speaking to people about my experiences as a coach.
I agree. I contrary to belief, I hate like this type of stuff because it makes me feel uncomfortable. But like, I love speaking to coaches. But if I was to film something on my like by myself without speaking to someone, I'm so awkward. It's unbelievably painful to watch. Like, and social media, I hate social media, but because of this, I have to do it. But it makes me uncomfortable, and like I completely agree. It's like pushing yourself to do things that you're perhaps not think you're able to, but you, like chase it.
Right, right. Yeah. If we go down together, right? If people didn't like this episode, at least we're in it together.
You're fine. You're fine. You're good. No, like, but the thing is, like, I think, and I think I've mentioned this to you when we were like going back and forward. Is like I hate structured podcasts for me because I feel like I'm so into the questions that I don't actually listen to what you're saying 100% of the time. So
Mm.
then we miss out on those great opportunities to like really dive into what you're saying and like get full explanations on exactly what's going on.
Right. No, I honestly I loved the structure of this podcast, and I will say, like, I do feel like you were listening to me the whole time, and your questions came based off of my answers to previous questions, and we circled back to things that we spoke about earlier. And I will say that coming in today, I said, "Wow, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. How is this going to go? Am I going to be able to answer all of these questions without freezing and, looking silly?" And there are other times where I've gotten the questions and I felt confident, but I also sit there and I write, okay, what is the perfect answer
Mhm.
for this? And then rather than just answering it naturally, sometimes you think about, this is what I'm supposed to say because this is what I wanted to say. And I think both are helpful because sometimes like I said, I'm an organized person. I like knowing what I'm in for, but I think that this was
This
great. And
must have been awful for you. I'm sorry.
no, I think we just had a great conversation. So I really appreciate you having me on.
No, I appreciate you for coming on. If you let everyone know where they can find you and sort of reach out as well.
Sure. My Instagram, probably best means of reaching out to me. It is Lilly, Lilly underscore Bernardi one. And my email's on the Hofstra website, but probably mainly anything strength and conditioning wise. I definitely go through my Instagram to connect with coaches.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure to sort of pick your brain as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was great. I enjoyed our conversation.
Peace.